What's up everybody, this is BR and today we're going to be talking about MMR, specifically the discussion of MMR forgiveness. As we all know, matchmakers in any kind of competitive game try to make fair matches of any kind, and unfortunately some people just, can't keep that integrity up. For whatever reason, they might leave, they might lose connection, or something that of the sorts. Or maybe they just decide to rage quit, We've all met those kinds of people. It doesn't matter. It's always going to happen, and there's no real way to stop it. So what does the game do? Well, most matchmakers tend to give some sort of MMR forgiveness to the rest of the team, where it's like, okay, so somebody just left your match, let's not count this as a loss as it wouldn't be fair. In a way, the person who left the match involuntarily or voluntarily sabotaged everybody else's MMR. And of course, that just means that there is no more integrity to the game. The MMR isn't going to be adjusted accordingly, since most matchmakers determine your MMR gain or loss based on either whether you win or lose. And if you're down a player because they just decided to be a dick, or maybe their internet went out, or for whatever reason, right? Maybe they had to go throw away the trash. The point is that the game decides, hey, you know what, that isn't fair, and your matchmaking isn't going to be adjusted accordingly because you're down a player. It's not going to be accurate, so the MMR that you would have lost is forgiven. You just don't lose any kind of MMR. The enemy team still gains MMR because, if the person left really late in the match, then I guess the match was already kind of determined, but at the very least, the people who lose don't get affected by the leaver. While they still technically wasted their time by being in a match that ultimately didn't mean anything for them, at the very least they also didn't lose MMR by being sabotaged. And that's how most game systems work. It's a way to mitigate the frustrations of playing over the internet. It just happens, there's no guarantee that somebody's gonna be there the whole time, and because of that, there just has to be some way to mitigate that frustration. Otherwise, if you do lose the MMR regardless of whether or not somebody left, then yeah, you're gonna be a little pissed. Especially if it's a long match, because it's something that's beyond your control. And of course, this is the standard with many games, unless you're playing Overwatch or Counter-Strike. But more specifically Overwatch, because Overwatch players tend to be a lot more vocal about this issue, that being MMR forgiveness. So in Overwatch, when somebody leaves a match, two things will happen. If the match is early on and there really is no actual progress done on either the objective or there just hasn't been that much time done, well, the game is just cancelled and everybody's free to leave. That's the end of the story. However, if the game has gone for quite a while, well, what happens? Unfortunately, the game doesn't cancel. Rather, what happens is the game continues on with one team missing a player. And unfortunately, one player can really make a difference between a victory or a loss, so more than likely, the match is a loss. And of course, your MMR gets adjusted because of that. You lost the match. It doesn't really determine anything else, it just sees it as you lost the match. And for a lot of players, this is understandably frustrating. It's not your fault that you lost the match. Somebody left the game, and of course, now you're down a player. Maybe you're down a support, maybe you're down a DPS, or God forbid, you're down a tank. That's it, it's game over, there's nothing you can do. The other person left for whatever reason, and of course now you're down to defend for yourself, and unfortunately, most of the time you're not going to be winning with that one less player. So of course, a lot of Overwatch players have gotten on their hands and knees and begged Blizzard, please grant us MMR forgiveness when somebody abandons a game mid-match. But Blizzard has never implemented that with Overwatch, and many people wonder why. It almost seems kind of straightforward. Well, the discussion actually goes a little bit deeper than that, because there's a lot of things that could happen. And these consequences tend to make things a lot worse for the overall player base, at least in theory. It could very much just be an exception, not the rule, but Blizzard's the kind of company to go towards a more non-toxic environment regardless of whatever. Even though if you do ask the majority of the Overwatch community, none of Blizzard's mechanics really do mitigate toxicity, but you know what, that's besides the point. So what do I mean? So there are two big consequences that could happen if you have an MMR forgiveness system added to the game. One is that people will abuse the system to no longer lose MMR. Maybe they'll make an alt, maybe they'll make another account, and they'll just use that to leave the game so that way a person can get boosted up to a higher rank without ever losing MMR when not necessary. And this is honestly what I think Blizzard is trying to avoid, because this is the kind of system that really relies on the honor code. you kind of have to assume that the person leaving is trying to be malicious towards his teammates or unintentionally malicious towards their teammates. But there are very much cases where somebody will use that kind of system to boost their teammates in some way, in this case by not having them lose MMR. And that really wouldn't be fair in the grand scheme of things. Somebody who's undeserving of that rank is going to be able to be boosted a lot higher than they would have because they're not taking the necessary L's. If the match appears to be going out of their favor, then of course they're just going to have their dummy teammate leave the match. Nobody loses MMR even though they were very much deserving of that loss. And honestly, I can see why that would be very frustrating for people who are trying to climb the ladder to be top 500, because then those who will be at the very tippity top are going to be the kind of people to really abuse that system. But personally, I do feel that this system can be patched down in such a way. I'm not entirely sure of what right now, but I'm sure that if you were to iterate on that idea, if you were to make that MMR forgiveness system more concrete and more foolproof, then yeah, I think it would definitely still be deserving to be put in the game. However, there is one more reason as to why they might not include this, and this is very much well articulated by Flats, and I give him credit for this because he talked about this in one of his streams. And it's an idea that I never really thought of before, but you know, here it goes. Here's the short and sweet of it. Another way that players might abuse the system is by instead ganging up on whoever they think is the weakest link. If for whatever reason they believe that maybe a Mercy is just losing the game for them, for whatever reason, it could be true, it could be not, it doesn't matter. They're gonna just pile on that person, they're gonna bully the crap out of them, telling them to leave the match so nobody loses their MMR. And that's honestly a really bad situation that I can very much take into consideration. Think about your last Overwatch competitive match. Think about how quickly it was for anybody to just quickly point the finger at somebody once they started losing. It's something that could very much happen, especially in Overwatch, because you can solo queue into a 4-stack. Now imagine you enter that match, maybe you're not performing as much, maybe you didn't warm up as well, or maybe you're just having an off day, and guess what? Now everybody's flaming you because you're the only one that's not part of their group, and because of that, you know, just the hive mind mentality, they all decide to pile on you, inflame you, and tell you to quit the game so that way they don't lose their MMR. That just isn't right. I don't care who you are, you don't have the right to do that, and that's not the way that the system should be used. Again, it's an honor system. It's a kind of system that entrusts the player that, hey, the person who's leaving is doing it because of maliciousness, but unfortunately sometimes that isn't the case. And I can very much understand why Blizzard would not want to add that kind of system, and that's what I agree with. Now, if there was a way for Blizzard to somehow detect how a person disconnects, then of course that would be entirely viable to adding an MMR forgiveness system. Make it foolproof and have it be in a situation that nobody can be bullied off of it. And I can very much see a system like this working, but unfortunately I don't think that MMR forgiveness should be granted at this point in time. There just isn't a way to do something like that. It's very difficult to tell the difference between someone disconnecting because of an accident, because maybe their power went out, and somebody disconnecting because they just decided to rage quit, or maybe because they're using an alt account in order to make sure that they get MMR forgiveness. Now, if you're wondering why this issue isn't such a problem in like a game like Apex, well, the reason is because in Apex, your MMR rank isn't determined by whether or not you win a game or lose a game, it's determined by an initial cost. At every rank, there's a cost to every single match that you play, and in order to make up that cost and go above, well, you need to get a certain amount of kills and you have to get a certain position in that match. And it's all based on performance, and it doesn't really matter if one match you're forgiven MMR, because more than likely the other person who won the match is probably getting more than 300 MMR points while you just got forgiven like around 60. The difference is very much huge, and in the grand scheme of things, the MMR loss really isn't that significant. But anyways, now I want to hear from you. What's your opinion on MMR forgiveness? How would you implement it? What would be like the little intricacies? Or maybe there's another game that has MMR loss down to a T. Who knows? Make sure to leave your comment in the comment section down below. If you found this video interesting, like it if you like it, dislike it if you disliked it. If you'd like to see more content just like this, make sure to subscribe. And if you'd like to support this channel, I do have a Patreon in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to my fellow patrons. I will talk to you guys later.